Okay, this lesson for the Koine Project Class is somewhat an effort to give us a more, let's say, socially acceptable way of conversing with others. When someone asked about Koine, I noticed that was quite unusual because it's so prevalent. If you do a search on the computer in any search engine and you type it in, it's millions of hits, I suppose, where it pops up all these websites and links, and it's incalculable, I suppose, for someone to try to go through all that, because a coin is like a coin, and this is actually a coin that says, "I am Koine, I am Koine," and on the back it has the Latin and the 7 stars and the candle stand. Um, Light shines in darkness. So to have a break, let's say, give you a reprieve, let's have a little fun and let's coin a phrase. Get it? A phrase. That's pronounced a phrase. And let's ask well, let's just say, what's it like to be a coin? There we go. A mid. Get it? A mid. A heads or tails world. So what is it like? I've noticed in reading a book titled 50 Years Among the Baptists, for example, a John Leland said 2 points Calvin, 3 points Arminian, or vice versa. And he was saying that would make a good compound. Some have tried to come to the middle and say, well, I'm a Calvinian or something like that. Now, Baptist, historically, those who identify with the faith long before Reformation, long before the established Catholic order that we know today, they readily say they are not Catholic nor Protestant. They say they are not Islamic nor Judaic. They say they are not occultic or New Age. They say, so they know what it is to be a coin. And you notice in the game of life, for example, football, which seems to be the game at this time of year especially, the referee comes out and one calls heads and one calls tails, and then they flip the coin. But it's so strikingly obvious that uh, it's similar to trends, when someone's open theist and now they're a closed theist, or like Dr. Michael Brown says, he was once a Calvinist, now he's an Arminian, and then Dr. Leighton Flowers says he was once a Calvinist, and he came out from it. He's not an Arminian, he's a provisionist, which means he took responsibility. Very unique, very unusual what he did, because you just don't often see people refusing to go back into the arena out from which they were called. And I often tell you all it's Egyptianity. You're asked to pick a pyramid. So what is it like? And why is it that the coin is often unnoticed? That is the fact that it has 2 sides. So when someone says, as we've gone over this so many times, let's just make a column for the coin. Yeah, that's what we'll do. Let's just put the coin here. And I literally pronouncing it just as we do the word coin. So there's our coin, and here's our world that we started with. You remember we have this open, and then we have closed theism. Now, if you pastor a church, that's really nothing that would interest us, because we have living God, living theism, and we have from the Torah to the apocalypse, text and context and implications. So whatever this is and whatever that is, if we aren't careful, someone will call open and someone will call closed. And it really is. For us, it can be humorous only because you can back out far enough. A book, The Argumentative Culture or something like that, by Deborah Tannen. Anyway, she was observing the argumentative culture and how words are charged deliberately. So they add the word war or smashed. Even in the book referenced an interview where they asked people how fast they assumed a car was traveling when it bumped into another car. And then they changed the word when it smashed into another car. Well, just by changing those words, amplifying the implications from each one, from bump to smashed, people began to write a much faster speed, and some even noticed shattered glass. So that just the word was a trigger, smash, for example. So let's talk about why people call heads or tails. Well, that's what they do. Let's not ask why yet. Let's just notice that priming is a large fact. It's a reality. We're all prime positive. One study showed that they took a group of people, divided them evenly, placed one group in a room isolated from the other. They spoke positively of, let's say, a particular issue. And then in the other room, they spoke very negatively. Well, then they joined the two groups together. And then when that issue was presented during a conversation, they were asked their opinions. And as they went through the different issues, they had planted, and that is deliberately charged and had primed the audience with this one particular issue. Well, just as you would think, those who had been primed positively wrote on their survey a positive view of that issue, and those primed negatively wrote a negative review of that issue. So we're easily primed. We're always primed. We're bombarded with commercials. We have formed categories, jargon almost to the point of you can't even keep up with it. Then we had the young versus old earth. Someone asked me if I were an old earther. I told them I never called that. And they said, "Are you a young earther?" I said, "I never called that." I remember as a child being mocked for thinking the Bible had the answers to everything. And I remember not knowing that notes in the margin, it wasn't until 1989, ordained by Landmark, the pastor there said of the Schofield Reference Bible that they gave me in the ordination service, he said, now, it had a lot of notes at the bottom. He said it's everything above the line is what's inspired. So he thought that should be the last word in that ordination service, that I should notice that I was being ordained to teach that which is above the line. Well, then the little margin notes, because I remember many times opening the Bible and just whatever date was there, never occurred to me. And I've certainly never heard of disproving that the King James Bible was inspired, since all of my life in the ecclesia, preachers would hold up the Bible, the English Bible, King James Version, say the Word of God's inspired, it's infallible, it's irrefutable, so being primed according to things that were quite established. I'm not really sure. Like I don't know what it would mean to call this or to call that, because then we leave out as we were in this class speaking of all the different types of time we have in the Bible, the fact that we have decay rates. But, there's really, I don't know anybody really that interested. It's like I said, unless you attend the seminary, I don't know where you'll go, because unless you just have friends that want to meet you at a coffee shop and discuss things in the Bible that don't really fall under the formed categories, because one of the professors, probably one of the most scholastic man that I know, as far as he has grandchildren, but he's one of the younger scholars. He grew up in missionary Baptist faith, father to his children, husband to his wife, brother in the covenant, pastor of a church, and professor in a seminary. So he, like they would say in the seminary, they could take any argument, deconstruct it, and then rebuild a better argument. Like Joe Biden, build back better. See, I'm just kidding. They would never talk about a politician, but so we could build a better argument. So if you want to, but what I was going to say is he taught this, for example, something called a gap. Now there's more than one gap theory. I've never counted them, nor do I have time to evaluate all those. So if you want to do that, use your language and do it. He said that was a fact. And now he's built an argument over here. And when it was brought to my attention, someone thought, what do you think about that? And I was like, well, it's my point exactly. What do you mean? I said, well, you've got heads and tails. That makes the coin. It's just to include the data from both perspectives. See, this would be quite inadequate. You're trying to prove a point rather than the implications of the context of the living God in contrast to dumb idols. Here you're calling something, and when someone asked me, did I believe the earth is 1,000 years old? I said, we were taught that in junior high, probably elementary school if I'd paid more attention. So I'm not really sure anymore, because you go to seminary, you spend all those years studying, learning tools to, it looks like you're really about to investigate something that calls for lexical, syntactical analysis, hermeneutics, systematic apologetics, systematic theology, a very critical approach. And yet you get there and now you find people even at the seminary level saying what we kind of already knew. We already had a King James Bible that had been, I suppose, refined by Baptists throughout the history of it. Its latter years especially, a reproduced final version, 1873, by Cambridge University, RFA Scribner, who, from pressure of 1850 by Baptists to take gross errors, it had nothing to do with inspiration, it had to do with printing and republishing and to make this, put it in the proper format. So we already had our Bible, and we already knew it was inspired. So I don't know why I would get up on a soapbox about the Bible being inspired. Don't know why I would get on a soapbox about the age and dates of the earth. Those are already in our center column. Someone did that. I don't know who did that, but I don't know really what we're doing. So for those of you in this class, you're learning critical thinking. You're learning what if you wanted the coin. I mean, what if you really wanted this, the meat of it, the substance of it, as Dr. David Robinson would tell us. Some of you will want to study more. You will. He introduced us to the Companion Study Bible. He said, for those of you that ever want to be that technical. Now, I'm sure he meant that meticulous, that precise, that content rich. So that's back to the coin. So if you want the coin, that's what we're doing. That's literally all we're doing. It's rather benign for someone like myself. Now, open, closed, young, old. What else did we have? We had, before, or after. Remember that regeneration? Before or after regeneration. And we learned, what did the Bible tell us? Exactly. We're fathered through the gospel. There we go. And we remembered what we learned was those who say regeneration, for example, is before or precedes, they're saying logically prior. And they're not saying, and those that say after is saying temporarily. So this is the only thing the scriptures can confirm, is because we noticed in our text that regeneration precedes the finite verb, or follows, is subsequent to the finite verb believe, and it does not precede that. So this was, the one who popularized this, you remember, was R.C. Sproul. He said logically prior, not temporally. So he accepted that the text doesn't position genao prior to, that is fathered, prior or generated prior to the finite verb. So that was a lot of, you remember that. And then we remember we have pre versus post. Some people call pre, some people call post. Now you remember there's more people that call heads or tails than there are people that bring the coin. From what I understand, the coin at major games becomes quite a commemorative item. From what I understand, like at great Super Bowls or something, the coin is custom made personally, precisely, and just for that occasion. I think that coin is perhaps given to some honorary person called in to toss the coin, and I'm certain those are quite valuable. So if you ever want to see something that will cause you to laugh as a student of the Bible who wants to be and notices and is attempting to be a coin, a coin amid a heads or tails world, you'll notice that even the world values that coin. So if you had the coin that was tossed at Super Bowl III, I'm certain that on eBay you would become a wealthy person from just that alone. So the coin does have value, being where we are, and we learned that meta, the English word after, that equal amid. Now that's not middle, that's amid. You remember it was just days before Noah embarked the ark. It was brimstone falling on Sodom as Lot was fleeing. Jesus said, when you see the horses battle array and begin to surround Jerusalem, flee. So that's cutting it very close. You remember the Bible distinguishes tribulation from the tribulation, the great one. And there is no text that says through the tribulation, the great one. It says out from, so we exit. So all that fits. Now, again, this is not anything unusual for us to notice that someone called pre, and I've heard all types of people say, I am pre-trib. I didn't know what that meant. And I don't mean I didn't know what pre meant. I mean, I didn't know what it meant to call it. And then I remembered when we were children, people would fight to call it first. I called it first. So sometimes people can get over here before you do. And again, but the most, as far as character, scholarship, integrity, fidelity, you can't surpass the testimony of Dr. Mark Thornton, for example. But when he can build a better argument for each of these than what's out there and what we call, and we've learned, commercialized Christianity, that's a fact. That's my point. So people say, what do you do about that when a person with that kind of scholastic aptitude and integrity can teach both? Say amen. Take notes, because you'll learn something when you learn to see from a point of view. Now, in my case, personally, I don't know what it is, but I've been, I guess you'd say, diagnosed by scientists who observe human behavior, and they notice that I have the inability to see from a point of view from where a contradiction appears. It does something to my brain where it won't settle or stop thinking until it's brought to, its logical singular conclusion. So that's an advantage as far as I'm concerned, because as my Calvinist friends say, their doctrine of total hereditary depravity, then it means it's not my fault, it's my nature that I cannot see from a point of view. But one thing that I did learn, example, some call themselves, in Christianity, I'm just saying in Christendom, in the largest category of it, there's Catholic and Protestant. Now, there's people today that call this and call that, and they weren't there for inquisitions and they weren't there for protests, but yet, they call it. And then, of course, there are the Baptists, the called out. So while they're calling that, and others are calling this, and of course people don't choose to be born into Protestant families. People don't choose to be born into Presbyterian homes, Methodist homes, Wesleyan households. People don't choose to be born in Catholic households, which their expression of Catholicism will be that particular view they hold currently. It'll always be contemporaneous. For example, what if you were born in the United States today as a Catholic? Well, there's even websites, Catholics for Choice. So you would be so far removed from the historical positions of Catholicism that if you were to go back in time, you would be prosecuted. I should say that more correctly, because they did have state authority. So sometimes we call it persecution, but to them, they were just prosecuting people who deviated. So here you have Baptists And that's what really intrigued me about this. When the more I noticed these people who said, we're not this nor that, well, that really resonated well with my kind of mind, my kind of thinking, and how I was hardwired my brain that way. So it was really nice to find this, people who want things like content. And of course, you probably won't be much use to anybody because nobody, you won't be called to come and speak at the Catholic Symposium of the historicity of the Catholic faith and its veracity in light of today's contemporary issues. No, and you probably won't get a phone call to come and speak at some Protestant Reformed. You won't be on the Reformed Wiki YouTube channel, and you won't be over here. So no one will really know what to do with you. The good news is they're not supposed to know what to do with us. We are here to be done with by Christ. And of course, this list, we could just go on and on and on. And I'll end here because my time has certainly gone much farther. You remember we have the compatibilism. I think I misspelled that. Compatibilism. Anyway, but can you really misspell it? So, and then we have libertarian. And this is with reference to free will. This is why sometimes this is just abbreviated libertarian free will. Now, there's a lot of liabilities with that, things you'll have to stop and explain. I'm a libertarian free willer, or I believe in free will, but I don't believe in this, this, and this. So you have to qualify. But in the Bible, we just have causal agency. So we are a causal agent. We cause ourselves to do or not to do something. So, and again, this is just what it is to be a coin amid a heads or tails world. And the only thing I've learned that was striking is that there's not much conversation. People aren't very conversant. You know, as someone I am commissioned to converse, I admonish our church, exhort them to converse, engage, initiate student-teacher relationships, Koine conversation, get to the content, you see. And then you can also, as I enjoy doing, is speaking to people that are being heavily influenced by those who've taken over the field of science and are feigning that it did not originate from theology, but it did. And calculus, physics, and chemistry are all products of theology. Pharmacology and technology are products of those branches of science. And calculus, for example, Leibniz and Newton both were theologians, and that's the language. Mathematics is the language of all science. So today, when people are feigning and pretending that somehow the Bible should be, if you're a thinking person or a scientist, you should oppose the Bible. Well, that's ignorance, just as someone who says, well, I believe the Bible, so I oppose science. So you have ignorance. Someone calls ignorance over here. I'm an ignorant person of science because I'm a believer, or I'm an ignorant person of the Bible because I'm a scientist. And again, that to a coin amid a heads or tails world, but it's really good when you can speak intelligibly and articulate rationally the origins of science being theology and the origin of theology being the Bible, and then the result being pharmacology and technology and all that we know today. So have a blessed day, but enjoy this. If you say, what's the big deal about coin, to coin a phrase, what's the big deal about being a coin amid a heads or tails world? Well, the big deal is you're taking care of what's necessary and what's best. So if you know someone who has studied this and someone who studied that, they might be able, if you get into a conversation, all three of you might collaborate. And then when you collaborate, you'll find, oh my, you were saying somewhat like I was saying, somewhat like you were saying, somewhat like when we put this in here. Oh my goodness. So a lot of times people don't want to meet you in the middle. I was laughing when some song came out a long time ago, Meet Me in the Middle. I said it doesn't often occur that people will. So you all keep studying. Don't be discouraged. laugh a little bit. If someone doesn't like, a religious person doesn't like you using the word fun, just say joy. Say it's a joy to speak with you, because if you say it's fun, they may not want to meet with you again. But anyway, so enjoy yourself. Have a blessed day.